Welcome back to the show. This week we have Andrea. Andrea, welcome to Journal Entries.
Well, thank you, Samantha, for having me on.
Yes, I'm so excited. And your story is just so inspiring and powerful. And I don't want to take anything away from that. So why don't we just jump right into your story, kind of where you're from and where you started to where you are now?
Well, thank you. I feel privileged to be able to share it. I currently live in San Diego, California, and it's beautiful out here, even in the middle of winter. So I'll start though as a child, but I'm not going to get into grade school things. But as a child, I had these dreams and I thought I was going to be this successful working woman that was going to have a family and I was going to balance it all. And I was just going to be living the dream, right? And I will say I did live the dream, but my dream turned out to be a little different than what I originally planned. I was successful and I was traveling all over the place. I was really had a exciting, fun, challenging career. I had two children in the early points of this, and I was able to manage it. We were doing great. I would stop work. I would, at the end of the day, I would enjoy the kids. They'd go to sleep. And then I'd be right back at it again, going, fulfilling whatever I didn't finish for the day until my son turned 11. And he ended up getting strep throat, very common virus that all kids get. Yet for him, it wasn't just a common virus. The virus, we suspect, crossed his blood brain barrier and immediately ignited debilitating OCD. And when I say debilitating OCD and immediately, I mean within a week, we were seeing significant signs of distress for him. For example, he went and played soccer, and we started seeing him after every goal touch the ground. And we're like, oh, what are we doing? And it was so obvious. So my husband pulled him aside and he's like, hey, what are you doing? My son said, oh, I got to do this. And my husband said, hey, well, knock it off. But he was like, this is just weird. But within a month, he was to the point where he couldn't walk through doors. He would turn off the lights. I mean, things that you see when you hear about OCD, but you're like, what is going on? We thought he had a brain tumor, and we took him in to get an MRI. And the night before the MRI, something just clicked in me. I thought, that's not a brain tumor. He's got OCD. And it probably clicked because I was up 22 hours of the night trying to figure out what was going on with my son, because not only was he doing these strange things, he was having these outbursts, these angry outbursts. And he was just, prior to all of this, he was such a pleasant, sweet child, very rational, like to the point of, he was just an old soul, so athletic and smart. And all of a sudden his world just started crashing. So we still took him in for the MR just in case, because I'm not a doctor. But then I started to do research. And unfortunately, in the mental health world, it is very, very difficult to find care. And I was calling all over the place. I mean, up to San Francisco, up to LA, trying to see if I could get him help. And of course, I tried down here as well. But one day, a doctor called me back, and she was actually calling me to tell me that she could not see him. She was a psychiatrist, but she called in the midst of one of his breakdowns with his sister. He had an 8-year-old sister at the time. And she said, is that your son that you're calling about? And I said, yeah. She says, I will see him tomorrow at 12:30. So she cleared her calendar. Needless to say, she has been our doctor to this day. She's amazing, and saved our life. I mean, really, he should have been hospitalized, but there was no hospital to see him early on. It would be 6 months. And quite frankly, I'm going to tear up. I can't imagine sending my 11-year-old away for any period of time. So I got a psychiatrist, I got the psychologist, and I got a therapist to help do some therapy called exposure response therapy, which is kind of the gold standard for OCD. And then obviously we worked with his pediatrician, but I became his at-home therapist, because you can only see those people so often, right? Financially and time-wise. But it took about 8 months to stabilize him, and we stabilized him. He was a rock star during this. It was the hardest thing either one of us have ever done, because therapy really goes against everything that you want to do as a parent. As a parent, You're wanting to protect your child from extreme fear. You're wanting to console them. But with ERP, you're having to expose your child or the person going through ERP to all of those things that terrify them.
Mm.
So I would have to be having, even though it seemed strange, like, okay, you can't open that drawer 5 times. You have to only open it once. For him not to do that was very distressful, because in what OCD is, it sends you these weird messages that if you don't do that, something bad is going to happen. And in his case, I did not know this until he kept this very private until he was about 20. The very bad thing that was going to happen was it was going to happen to me. I was going to die.
Wow.
So if he didn't do any of these things, I was going to die. So that's very distressful to a child. And it's probably good that he didn't tell me this until later, because I don't know if I would have been able to be so strong. We went through that daily, sometimes, actually, most of the time, multiple times a day, as we were trying to get him to be able to overcome his OCD and to master it. He will always have OCD. It doesn't go away, even without the presence of strep throat, but it's manageable. He is about ready to graduate college. He is an amazing kid, and he's super strong because of it. Now, during those 8 months, I should have mentioned I had to stop work. I was probably pretty obvious because I was there all the time, but I had to stop work. And my husband had to really pick up the side of that. And he was traveling all the time, so he was not present. Obviously, I was not emotionally present for my 8-year-old daughter. I was doing the best I could, but I had to be there for him during the crisis time. So I had to outsource her care, basically, ask a neighbor to take her to her singing lesson or to take her to school. And it was very hard to be present, even though I tried. So once he got stabilized, I said, okay, now I need to go back and really fix her, see what we can do. There's got to be abandonment issues. Well, of course, there were all sorts of things that kind of were the fallout of that. And I took her in to get checked out, and it came out that she had some severe anxiety. And we worked with her for about a year to try to calm this anxiety without medication. And then after about a year, we said, okay, gosh, I think we need to get some help. Therapy just wasn't cutting it. Well, unfortunately for her, she is medication resistant. And when she took the medication, it took her into a flurry of all sorts of other issues. Wouldn't sleep for days, or she became, then we would switch a medication, and she would end up getting like some sort of an OCD type symptom of it. This went on forever, and she was on between 15 to 16 different medications or cocktails of medications. We did biofeedback for her. We did neurofeedback. We did virtual reality type stuff with her, in addition to all of the therapy and those kind of things, trying to help her be able to manage her anxiety. At one point, in 7th grade, it got really bad because of the hormone fluctuation with puberty, that she couldn't actually get to school but 9 days out of the semester. And it didn't mean that we weren't taking her to school. It meant that every single day I was taking a baby step to get her to school. And that baby step could have been, this morning, you're going to pick up your skirt and you're going to put your skirt on. That's all you have to do. And then the next day would be, okay, let's put on your skirt, and now let's walk to the front porch and stand here for 20 minutes. Then it would be, we get to the car. Okay, now we're going to drive to the Starbucks that's closest to school. Okay, now we're going to go into the school parking lot. Then we're going to go into the school office. And it took the entire semester to get her to school. It had gotten so bad. Anyways, fast forward to today with her. She, again, is thriving. She's in her 2nd year of college. She still does not take medication, but she's so strong. She's learned how to manage her anxiety, also has depression. And we were fortunate when she was 18 to be able to start her on something called TMS, or transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is a non-invasive procedure that is effective in about 60 to 70% of the people for treating severe depression. medication, and it can help with anxiety. It's just not FDA approved for it. But she did that when she turned 18, and it's been a life changer for her. So both kids stabilized, doing amazing, took our family through hell and back. And when they started moving on and I was going to be going into my next phase of life, I was a little torn. I had this amazing career beforehand. I stopped for about 12 years and I thought, okay, I want to get it back and do something because that's who I am and what I like to do as well. But it all kind of seemed frivolous, right? Like, am I going to just go back and do what I was going to do? So I was thinking, how can I give back to this world? What can I do? What gifts do I have? And so I thought, you know what? I can't be a therapist because I'm not built like that. I've already done that for 12 years for my own kids and it was hard. But I said, you know what I can do is I can build a community for parents that feel hopeless, lost, lonely. And I started my podcast This Way Up. Oh, and my husband and I started our own independent business outside of it. But that, my friend, is in a nutshell what has happened over the last 22 years of my life.
That's just so incredible. And what stands out to me is the transitions. And for some reason, when you said before all of that went down with your kids, you had like a good job and you would travel. And it just brought me back to way before I had kids, before I started working for myself. That was my life too. I had a corporate job and I would travel, and it's such a different lifestyle
It
than,
is.
having kids. And so the first question I have for you is, you had such a drastic change from like you were also a mom at the same time and
Right.
working, but then going from like really working to full-time mom, therapy mom, all of the things, and then the transition out of it too, like once your kids left. So did you do anything that helped you with both of those transitions for yourself? Because it seems like that was really a heightened emotional state likely to go from both of those experiences.
No, but I don't want to just keep it at that. The first transition, I was so involved with my son's care that I did not have time to do anything for myself. It was full board, I'm taking care of him. Now, with that being said, a big part of my podcast is talking about self care. And one of the lessons that I learned is that you do have to do self care during those times. And reflecting on that, I noticed that I would have been better had I taken some time to pause. But I felt very, very selfish doing that. Like, if this doesn't get done, I mean, like I said, my husband was traveling and I had 2 kids at home. There wasn't a time to help for me to understand and to focus on myself. So I thought, but
Mhm.
I should have. I should have, because there are things you can do for yourself that don't take a lot of time. And if you're doing those things for yourself, you're better able to show up for somebody else. And I didn't realize it at the time. I mean, I was desperate. As a matter of fact, at one point, my husband came home from traveling and I was sleep deprived, mentally deprived. The therapy was very difficult. It was emotionally draining, but I would still try to learn. And my husband said to me, whenever I worded it, sounds so much worse than it was, but because I word it like how I felt at the time, but it was almost like, you're not doing anybody any favors. You're bringing the stress into this family.
Mhm.
That's how the message came across to me. Now, years later, when we were able to talk through it, what he was trying to say was, you need to stop. You need to take a break and allow yourself time to mourn, allow yourself that time to reflect, and allow yourself that time to rejuvenate. That's not what I heard at the time, but that's fine. Now, transitioning back into, not out of motherhood, because you don't transition out of motherhood. I'll tell you the truth. When my kids were both, graduating and looking at moving on, I mean, there was a huge mourning period, right? I mean, they were my life, still are. And there was this mourning period of, I'm not going to have relevance in this world anymore.
Mhm.
Who am I going to be? How am I going to contribute? They were my everything because, as you know, when you were in the corporate world, you're so focused on everything. You're a go-getter, you're a go-doer. So that doesn't change when all of a sudden you become a mom and you're now a full-time mom person. You've still got that that drive, that need, and all of a sudden you dump everything into that. And so here I was now transitioning again, and I thought I had to dump everything into my next phase of life as well. But I think age has taught me that there's a balance to all of that. And so while I was mourning that I was no longer going to be this mother, I was no longer going to have this relevance, this journey of kind of trying to explore what I was going to do opened my eyes that I could have more balance and that I can, and whatever I needed to do next needed to provide me with that balance of being a mom and having this piece of me that is mine, that is not anybody else's.
I love all of that. I wrote down the word mourn because the first time you said that, I was thinking that's so important and doesn't get talked about often. It's
Mhm.
the mourning of so many things, of like the life that you thought that you were going to have, the life
Right.
that you did have, and in so many different aspects, and being able to have awareness of that your life is changing, and the roles that you played, the roles that you thought you would play, the role that you will be playing,
Mhm.
and giving yourself that freedom to mourn it is so powerful. And I've had that experience through my divorce of just mourning what I thought would be. And
Right.
as soon as I allowed that, it was like it just lifted. I gained so much clarity from that. But before, it felt so heavy, and I was clinging on so tightly to what I thought I wanted, like the experiences that I thought I should create almost.
Yeah.
So, one question, kind of a follow-up question, is you said you talk about this on your podcast,
Yeah.
but what would you say if I have any listeners that are in any transition period, maybe not the exact same, but a transition period, and they feel like they don't have that time, they're all
Mhm.
in on whatever that transition is, what type of advice would you give that type of person?
Well, interestingly enough, just had a guest on my podcast a half an hour ago, and we were talking about self care. And one of the things that we talked about were these snack size or these snack bits of self care. That
Mm,
self care doesn't have to be this spa day or that you're going out and you're doing even an exercise class for an hour, is that you can and need to take little bits of time. Now, if you're getting into a situation where you're feeling overwhelmed, could you take 5 minutes and just breathe? Could you take 10 minutes and go for a walk outside? What are some of these things that you can do that open your mind for clarity? You talk about journaling. Can you just write down a few things? You don't have to spend, that was okay. I will be honest. I've tried journaling, I don't know how many times. And I always feel like first I have to be an author. And secondly, I have to, write for pages on end. But what
mhm,
I've realized over time, sometimes it's just a couple of sentences. It's just getting what's inside here out. And when you talked about mourning just for yourself, when you were talking about how you mourned your divorce and how you felt that weight lifted, it was the permission that you gave yourself to get it out. And I think when we don't do any kind of self care, we keep all of that in, right?
mhm,
And so if you just take 5 minutes of breathing, you're getting some of that out. If you go out for 10 minutes and you take a walk, you're getting some of that stuff out that you just keep like just compact and pushed down deep into your body.
mhm. My word of the year is energy. And what I mean by that is I just want to do activities, ideally throughout my day, that give me energy, and likewise say no to things that drain me. And it's things like you're mentioning. I want to get out and just go for a 5-minute walk because that energizes me. It makes me feel good. I think back to like my corporate days or even the early days of when I started working for myself, and it was just hustle, hustle, hustle. Like I would not look up. And I think a lot of moms even get stuck in this of just like parenting and present parenting and, doing all of the things. And they don't realize that there's so many different options that they can do that would really change the way that they physically feel. And it could be
Yeah.
something as simple as those things you just mentioned.
Another one that I guess I have said it, but that was a big one for me. And I think one that so often gets lost is this concept of fun. When
Mm.
life gets difficult, we lose fun, we lose humor. I found for myself, and I do this to this day, is humor and fun are always what I go back to, get myself through difficult times and to make things not seem so scary.
So I want to talk about your purpose. One of my clients right now, actually, she's a mom of three. And one thing that she is struggling with slash working on is finding her purpose. It's something
Yeah,
that she's been working on for a while. And I think a lot of moms especially can relate to that because again, once you have kids and like you were saying, it's so easy to like put so much energy into them and we want to, right? It's not like
right.
we have to, but especially for you, it seems like your purpose probably has shifted and pivoted a
Yeah.
lot based on just the transitions and circumstances that you've had. So, how do you feel like you've been able to find your purpose? And has it changed throughout these transitions or has it like remained the same, do you think?
I think my purpose found me, and it has changed. I'll go back to before I had kids and I was in the corporate world. I remember at that point even grappling with what's my purpose. I felt like I was doing this corporate job and really was I helping anybody? I remember I looked into, do I want to be a teacher? Nope, did not want to be a teacher. Do I want to go back to school and get my degree in psychology or psychiatry? And really didn't do that. And the way that I started to look at things in my career, I even looked into nursing. But maybe that's not my purpose. My purpose isn't this, what everybody kind of has is this traditional giver. My purpose is to help individuals. And so I would realize that every time I made contact with somebody, whether I was in sales and then I was in management and then I was in national accounts and global accounts and those kind of things, but I realized that I needed to look like I was a trusted advisor. I was a giver. How could I help them within the realm of what they needed? Not necessarily in the realm of what the world sees as a good person or what I think is. And then that transitioned into being a parent when I realized you really didn't have a choice. That was your focus no matter what. And then I think as I started to transition out of corporate world into the other world, parenting world, I guess, I just started to naturally do what I needed to do to fulfill myself. And that is pretty easy to do when you have kids, right? I mean, there's a constant, you're seeing this constant feedback of, okay, I'm doing a good job or I'm not doing a good job. And then as I moved out of being a day-to-day parent, I realized that I still wanted to help. I still needed to help. And how can I help on a bigger scale, but still realize that I'm not Mother Teresa. And that's okay. My purpose doesn't have to be this big thing that's surrounded in spotlight. My purpose is that individual. How can I make a difference in somebody's life? That's really the purpose found me.
Yeah. And it's kind of stayed the same, but the outlet has changed.
Yeah.
Now you do the big scale is the whole wide world with your podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. But interestingly, when you start in podcasting, right, it's tough, right? It's pretty, you're like, okay, how many people are listening? But I had a girlfriend tell me from the very beginning, she says, Andrea, if one person listens and you help one person, you're fulfilling your purpose. And again, I'm back to that reminder of what my purpose was. My purpose is the individual and helping the individual.
I love that. So I'd love for you to take the opportunity to share with my listeners what your podcast is about, because I
Sure.
really think that if any of my listeners are struggling with what, going through transitions and what your podcast is the place to go for that. So do you want to talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, so the name of my podcast is This Way Up, and it's titled that because even though when you're in the midst of all of that, you feel like you can't find your way up, I really was hoping that the message is there's always a way up. That this is the way up. This is the way to the light. You're there, and it has three three basic, I don't know, tentacles, which is a place to be validated. So we have personal stories on there of parents and caregivers who have loved ones who are struggling with mental health, and listening to their stories. It's always validating to hear what somebody else has gone through, that you're not alone. It's great to hear where they've seen light and joy or where they've seen struggles and how they've gotten out of it. The second tentacle would be self-care. We all could use this, but those that have family members or loved ones who are going through a tough time often, as we discussed earlier, do forget themselves. And so we give self-care tips. And then last one is bringing on resources and professionals to talk about maybe modalities that you're not aware of, or as a parent, bringing in school professionals so you can understand how to navigate the world that is around you. It's been on the air for 2 years, and I have had just a ton of amazing guests that have offered so much insight. And it's transitioning. It's transitioning from where it used to be just for parents to really where it's talking about mental health in general, and not necessarily mental health in the sense of this long-term depression or anxiety. It could be short-term incidences that they're experiencing. So,
So good. I knew that your podcast was This Way Up, but I never knew the reasoning behind that. That's
yeah.
so special.
Yeah. And my little logo, by the way, for anybody who sees, is an upside down smiley face, kind of like it's topsy turvy. So it's you just turn it around, and really again it's designed to be a place for hope.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Andrea, for coming on the show and sharing your story. I can't imagine actually going through that. I'm glad to see that you're on the other side and actually using everything that you've learned to pour into yourself now. And you'll never not be a mom, right? It's just a
Right.
different version of that. But
Yeah.
I love that you're now getting to share all of this with people like us and all of my listeners.
Yeah. One last thing on this. I just want to say it's cliche, I know, but things happen for a reason. I don't look at any of the struggles that we had in our family as anything other than a blessing. I wouldn't want my kids to have that blessing again, but it really made us a very, very strong family. It turned my kids into extremely empathetic humans. And now, like you said, it's driven me to my purpose.
Yeah, such a good perspective.